Hey, thanks for tuning in. In this video, we're going to talk about an issue that, even though it might not be a normal part of conversation, it's an issue that is relevant to a lot of people, and it's an issue that does have commands in the Torah about it. So it's an issue that we do need to talk about, and that is commands regarding a woman's period. In the law, there are essentially two categories of commands regarding the period. There are commands regarding sex, and there are commands regarding uncleanness. These commands are described in Leviticus 18:19, Leviticus 20:18, and also Leviticus 15:19 through 31. In looking at this issue, first let's go into Leviticus 18. Verse 19 says, "And to woman in separation of her defilement, you shall not near to denude her nakedness." So basically, when a woman is on her period, when she is in separation of her defilement, which we will define more specifically soon, a person is not supposed to come near to her to have sex. There is not supposed to be any sexual activity during this time. Also, let's look at Leviticus 20:18. "And man which shall lie down with woman of sick, and he shall denude her nakedness, her wellspring. He caused to make naked, and she denuded wellspring of her bloods. And they shall be cut, two of them, from near their people." So once again, reiterating that sexual activity is not supposed to go on during this period. And the result of it is being cut from near your people, which obviously is not something good. We want to be a part of the congregation. We want to be a part of the people. We don't want to be thrown out. And we need to define what is this period of separation. What defines that actual separation period of time? So let's look at Leviticus 15:19. "And woman that shall be flowing, blood shall be her flow in her flesh. 7 days she shall be in her separation." So this period of separation is generally going to be 7 days. And the 7 days starts at the point that the period begins. It does not matter if it lasts fewer than 7 days. It is still 7 days, generally speaking. However, there could be an issue which it could be longer than 7 days, as described in Leviticus 15:25. "And woman that shall flow of her blood many days, not in time of her separation, or that she shall flow on her separation, all days of flow of her defilement shall be as days of her separation. She is defiling." So basically, there is supposed to be no sexual activity between a man and a woman while the woman is in her separation. And separation is defined as 7 days from the start of her period. It doesn't matter if it lasts fewer than 7 days. It's a 7-day minimum for the monthly period. However, if it does last longer than 7 days, then it continues, that separation period continues until the bleeding stops. And also, if it is unrelated to a period, assuming there is bleeding going on separate from that some other time, for the time that the bleeding is occurring, no sexual activity. The rest of the laws largely hinge upon issues of people becoming unclean. In looking at issues of clean and unclean people, we need to recognize that a person becoming unclean does not mean that they have violated a command. Now, a person could violate a command and become unclean as a result, but simply becoming unclean is not an issue of morality. There are things which are completely fine to do, and yet you will become unclean by doing them. So, for example, sex, even if it is done completely in line with all of the commands, a person will still become unclean by doing so. But that's not a problem. It's just something that would need to be taken into account in regard to other commands, such as the commands regarding the tabernacle. We want to not be bringing our defilement to the tabernacle. And this is the primary issue that we're talking about as far as it pertains to a person becoming unclean. A person can become unclean and have it not actually be an issue of violating a command. However, it would become an issue of violating a command if we then brought that uncleanness into dealing with the offerings, into dealing with the tabernacle. So I think we need to be aware of that frame around the issue of becoming unclean. So there are commands that a person can violate the command, like, for example, touching an unclean beast's carcass. Touching the carcass causes a person to become unclean, but it is also a command to not touch the carcass. A woman being on her period causes her to become unclean, but there is not a command that says a woman is not allowed to do that. So it's not an issue of some kind of morality problem. So let's continue looking at Leviticus 15, starting in verse 19. In woman that shall be flowing, blood shall be her flow in her flesh. 7 days she shall be in her separation, and all of the one touching in her shall defile unto the evening. So as we see, it's a 7-day long period that she is in her separation, assuming this is a normal period. And all of the one touching her shall defile unto the evening. So if a person touches a woman that is on her period, then they become unclean. Once again, it's not a violation of a command for a person to touch a woman on her period. It's not breaking a command to do that. But a person would become unclean as a result. And so this probably relates to certain rabbinic practices of not shaking women's hands in public and basically separating themselves physically from women. They are presumably trying to maintain ritual purity. They are presumably trying to stay clean. And so it's obviously a person's not going to go up to some stranger in public or someone that's not following the Torah and just ask them, oh, are you not on your period so I know whether I can shake your hand or something. Obviously, that's not going to go on in polite conversation in our society. And so, as a result, these practices have developed. Now, these practices are not in the commands in that way, but they relate to practically applying the commands when one is trying to maintain cleanness. So continuing on, and all which she shall lie down on it in her separation shall defile, and all which she shall sit on him shall defile. So here we have that a woman's bed, a woman's seat, they cause uncleanness while she is in the period of her separation. There is not a command that says not to sit on them, but a person that does, as you will see, will become unclean. And all of the one touching in her bed shall launder his clothes, and he shall wash in waters, and he shall defile unto the evening. And all of the one touching in all article which she shall sit on it, he shall launder his clothes, and he shall wash in waters, and he shall defile unto the evening. So if a person touches the bed or sits on the seat of a woman during her separation, he shall defile. And in order to become clean, he needs to launder his clothes, he needs to wash his body, and then at evening he'll become clean. And if on the bed is he, or on the article which she is sitting on him, in his touching in it, he shall defile unto the evening. And if lying down, man shall lie down with her, and her separation was on him, and he shall defile 7 days. All of the bed which he shall lie down on it shall defile. So we've already looked at commands that explicitly prohibit this, that a man is not supposed to engage in sexual activity with a woman that is on her period or is in her separation. But in the case that someone does, so this could be someone that's not observant, for example, they would then defile us if we came into contact with them in a way that is similar to the separation itself. Continuing on, and a woman that shall flow of her blood many days, not in time of her separation, or that she shall flow on her separation, all days of flow of her defilement shall be as days of her separation. She is defiling. So just as we discussed earlier, there is this 7 days, and there is also, in the case that a period lasts longer than 7 days, or the issue of bleeding that is not taking place in accordance with the period, bleeding at some other time, these are treated in the same way as the actual separation for the period. It is just taking place for the time that the bleeding is occurring, in the case of this time that's not during the period, or in the case of the time that lasts longer than 7 days. So continuing on, all of the bed which she shall lie down on it all days of her flow, it shall be as bed of her separation to her. And all of the article which she shall sit on it shall be defiling, as defilement of her separation. And all of the one touching in them shall defile, and he shall launder his clothes, and he shall wash in waters, and he shall defile unto the evening. So this is basically reiterating what we looked at in regard to the normal time of the month. This is basically the same thing. Just as it says it shall be as the days of her separation. Now the next part refers to an offering that takes place. I want to point out that this offering is identical to an offering that goes on earlier in Leviticus 15 as it pertains to a person, whether it be a man or a woman, that has a flow, so presumably an oozing sore. In the case that this goes on, whether a man or a woman, they are to engage in this same ritual after they are healed from it. So this is not an offering that's unique to women or anything like that. It is an offering that is used elsewhere in Leviticus 15 for other issues of flow, other issues that don't relate immediately with the period. And this offering is, and if she cleansed from her flow, and she shall recount to her 7 days, and after she shall cleanse. And in the 8th day she shall take to her 2 turtle doves, or 2 sons of dove, and she shall cause them to come to the priest, to opening of tent of meeting. And the priest shall do the one wrongdoing and the one assent. And the priest shall cover on her 2 faces of Yahuwah, from flow of her defilement. And you shall cause to sequester sons of Israel from their defilement, and they shall not die in their defilement, in their defiling my tabernacle, which is in their midst. So these issues of becoming unclean, becoming defiled, they largely connect to the presence of the tabernacle, because we don't want to be bringing our defilement to the tabernacle. We don't want to be defiling the offerings, that sort of thing. So a lot of these practices that have evolved out of these commands regarding becoming unclean are largely dependent upon trying to preserve someone as being clean. There is no law regarding, for example, not shaking hands with a woman. There is no law regarding you're not allowed to sit in a woman's seat because she may be on her period. And there is no law regarding having separate sleeping arrangements for a man and his wife while his wife is on her period. There are no commands about this, but it does relate to the issue of becoming unclean and the issue of a practical way of maintaining that cleanness. And in some sense, it would make sense to do these things because in the case that someone is going to go to the tabernacle, they would need to maintain their ritual cleanness. They would need to make sure that they were staying clean. So those sorts of issues are not quite as relevant to us today in the absence of the tabernacle. But once the tabernacle will be rebuilt, and once the offerings and the priesthood return to the tabernacle, at that case, there would be a need probably to apply some of these methods to maintain ritual purity, to maintain cleanness. But there is no command that says that you can't become unclean or you're not supposed to become unclean because of a woman on her period, or for the woman herself for that matter. But it does matter regarding sexual activity with a woman that is in her separation. And separation is a minimum of 7 days, assuming it's the monthly period. And of course, there are the issues of if it's longer than 7 days, then it continues. And if it's just some day or abnormal bleeding, then it's for as long as that is occurring. So no sexual activity during the separation, and you can check out the uncleanness issues and look into that as well. Thanks for watching. Feel free to check out some of my other videos on other Torah issues, and be sure to stay in touch so we can continue discussing the Torah. Thanks for watching. Remember the commands. Shalom.